my name is Pete Tseronis. I am your host for today's episode of Industry Insights, and I'm super honored to be here with our guests, who I will get to in a minute. I want to remind everybody the essence of Industry Insights. It's an Anterix sponsored webinar series where we talk with, sometimes walk with, the thought leaders, change agents, and so forth in this utility communications, energy industry space that is highly complex, but after today and through with our prior episodes, we hope that we're creating a few light bulb moments. And today we're going to discuss the future of the utility industry with subject matter experts from around the world and around the country. So we'll get to that in a minute. But most importantly, I'm the only dude on this panel. We are celebrating Women's History Month. They should have a year. They should have a day every month, as far as I'm concerned. Women are playing such an important role in the advancement of technology across our country and around the world in a digitally connected world. We're also excited to be kind of collaborating with the Wireless Infrastructure Association, a great group of folks that feature stories of 38 women making an impact in the wireless infrastructure industry and community. So please check them out. They are celebrating International Women's Day and Women's History Month as well, as the whole world should be. And we're just excited to be collaborating with, again, the Wireless Infrastructure Association. They have a great blog that they've put together on women in this industry. And again, have a look. So thank you to that group and to the good folks at Anterix. I do have a fun fact with Women's History Month. I just have to go there, how it was started and all that sort of thing. It really started in 1978, from what I gathered, in the school district of Sonoma, California, 1978. And there was a week-long celebration of culture, history, and society. And what do you know, what was it I read years later, since 1995, presidents have issued a series of annual proclamations designating the month of March as Women's History Month. So shout out to Sonoma, California. They got great wine, and obviously they kicked off a great historical moment. So there you go. That's the beginning. Our guests, the most important people. You see three of the folks, and we also have Dr. Martha Symko-Davies from the National Renewable Energy Lab on. Martha, why don't you just say hey really quick so people know you're actually here?
Hi, Martha Symko-Davies. I'm with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and I focus on energy systems integration. And a big shout out to Pete and Anterix and these wonderful women that I'm on the panel with. Thank you.
Lots more to come. I'm going to brag a little bit about you, Martha, but yes, Laboratory Program Manager at the ESIF. We call it inside the Beltway and outside the Energy Systems Integration Facility at one of our 17 national treasures in this country, the National Laboratories. I've known Martha for a while. She's amazing, awesome, super smart, and she tells great stories. All these ladies do here. So thank you, Martha, for that. We also have Liana Ault, who by way of across the pond comes to us from the UK, Energy CTO Innovation Lead at Nokia Energy Global Practice. We have Alia Amireh. I did nail it, so I'm feeling good and she's smiling. Senior Engineer of OT Connectivity at Xcel Energy, which operational technology, we'll get into that, how it differentiates from information technology. So fired up to have Alia here, who represents this sector that's benefiting from and actually pioneering a lot of the innovation happening in our energy community. And then Kathy Nelson, principal at West Monroe Partners. Kathy's got an amazing pedigree. She's got a podcast. We do have two folks from Minnesota, one by way of Palestine, but at the same time, but you know, we do have the great state, or the, what is it, 10,000 Great Lakes of Minnesota representative. And I'm inside the Beltway here in DC. Pete Tseronis, former CTO, love being a part of this, and I learn every time we talk. So with that, Martha gave a nice introduction about the place she works. I'm going to kind of ask our guests here to kind of build a little bit upon where you work and your specific role and why you're so passionate about the organization that you work in. Why don't we start, at least on my far left, with Liana.
Hi, thanks, Pete. So I work for Nokia, and as you mentioned, I am in the UK, but obviously a native-born American. And what I really do is work with power utilities globally to identify the challenges and obstacles they're having in their communication solutions and find solutions either from Nokia or maybe from some of our third-party partners to help address those challenges. And so it's really been a passion of mine moving to a power utility from a communications provider. Energy is something we use every day. It really powers the quality of life as we know it in society. And so I'm very passionate about being able to enrich people's lives, be able to keep them safe, keep them warm. And so I fell in love with energy about 7-8 years ago, and I hope to never leave it. Now it's nice because I get to work again globally with power utilities, and it's interesting because their challenges are the same across the board. And so that's been a real eye-opener for me going into the international stage.
Well, I'm going to build off and riff off some of that because aside from the 20 plus years, folks, Liana has this opportunity to be a bit of an ambassador and an explainer, similar to what I had during my time and continue to this day, of how complex the energy sector is. There's a lot of polysyllabic terms, but having the global perspective, having worked at Amireh, another utility that's incredibly significant in the grand scheme. We're going to get into things like women in STEM and some other topics. I know you're very passionate about, Liana, but we are honored to have you, and thank you. Alia, you're up.
So first of all, I'm excited to be part of this panel. Thanks Anterix and thanks Pete. I work for Xcel Energy on the OT connectivity sector, and I came from 16 years of experience in the telecommunications and wireless industry. And I'm excited about converting over to the utility because now with all the evolution in technology and wireless and communications and everything is becoming bi-directional, I'm excited to be a part of it and kind of bring in the private LTE into the utility world as one platform to control all different systems out there. I'm also very passionate about STEM, and it's just an exciting time to be in the utility because it's an evolution and it's becoming more and more important every day in our lives.
You got that right. And again, the undersell of your awesomeness, electrical engineer, radio frequency engineer. I ran Spectrum at the DOE. I know how cool it is and how some people can fall asleep when you talk about it. But it is the critical infrastructure. And Alia, I'm excited that you're going to lend a lot of that insight as to without Spectrum, without the most important critical communication medium, we don't get to do even just this today. So shout out to you. I also do like the fact that you broach this private LTE in a world of resilience that we'll discuss as an option for a lot of the stakeholders to consider so that we don't have a single point of failure. So thank you for bringing that up. Kathy, how the heck are you? I know, Kathy, you're going to talk a little bit, but I mean, the cool part, being chairperson of the Utilities Technology Council, an entrepreneur and podcaster and hailing from Minnesota, which I've been to once and didn't know Charles Schultz and all the Peanuts people were from that area. I thought it was pretty cool. Welcome. Give us a little bit about your background and passion.
Yeah, thanks, Pete, and thanks to Anterix, and it's an honor to be here with these wonderful women, so really glad to be here. I am a principal at West Monroe, which means basically what I do is I'm a utility technology strategist, and I am a subject matter expert within the practice. And I have been in the utility telecommunications space basically for almost 28 years, so I'm feeling kind of old. Like, it's hard to believe that it's been that long. I spent 25 years at a generation transmission cooperative in Minnesota and really grew up learning and understanding the technology space within utilities and how important that is. One of the things that I think is really interesting is how, when I started, the energy industry had been pretty stagnant for a very, very long time. What my hiring manager, when I was interviewing with him, said, you should come over to communications because, 60 cycle has been the same for 100 years. He's like, it's super boring. And who would have thought that we'd be where we are now in the energy space and really being at that crux of technology and the energy space is so interesting, and every day is different. Talking about broadband spectrum is something I'm really passionate about, and advocating for spectrum is something I worked pretty hard at UTC, and it's really underpins the ability for us to bring these technologies to the electric grids, and it's changing and it's evolved significantly, and having spectrum that we can build our private utility networks for mission critical applications on is really an exciting space to be right now.
100%. And folks, if you've gathered one thing, as I like to always call it, you're going to get a tapestry of wisdom and not enough time with these ladies today. But Kathy, you also have a very rich experience in what I've come to learn, distributed energy resources, which is going to jump back to Martha here for a minute as we kind of kick off. We're going to try to segment this for our audience, as we know, to tell some stories, use cases, for examples. If we can look at the glass half full, because easily when you get into things like cybersecurity and Internet of Things and the bad actors, that, hey, look, I think one of the themes we talked about in our prep call was balancing innovation with also regulation, balancing the opportunity with mitigation of risk. So I hope that our audience understands that everything takes coordination, stakeholder involvement, and Alia really stressed this, which is collaborative communication and coming together. So, all right, let's kick it off. Martha, Dr. Martha, I would like you, if you can, because not everybody knows what a national lab is, but more importantly, the National Renewable Energy Lab is not just about green tech and clean tech. There's a cyber component, a high performance computing. Can you talk about what you're most excited about right now that ties to some of this topic, which is grid modernization, but also some projects people can read about at the NREL?
Yeah, so I have the pleasure to work on energy systems integration through our energy systems integration facility that really focuses on not just the electrical, but thermal, fuels, water, cyber. How do you think about addressing all the challenges we have out there? Xcel, for example, will come to us and say, we've got to get to 100% renewable energy, San Diego Gas and Electric, Hawaiian Electric, all these utilities, all these folks are coming to us and they're trying to figure out how is it that we can best support them in terms of security and resilience in terms of their communities that they support. And so at the end of the day, how do you support from the design, the development, the demonstration of these smart, resilient, and secure communities of the future that support our whole industry that's looking at autonomous energy grids? How do you think about getting 10 devices together that communicate within, for example, in a community? We worked with Holy Cross Energy, where they have a community, Basalt Vista. It's a low-income community where they have 28 homes that are connected, low-income homes that were built by Habitat for Humanity. Now, as we think about that, how is that community going to be secure and resilient? How is each home with its HVAC, with its solar, with its electric vehicle plugins, how are they all going to communicate together within a community? What does that communication look like as you move from tens to hundreds of devices? And how do you do it in a secure and resilient way? Can you address cybersecurity challenges? Can you address natural disasters? All these forces are coming with us at one time, and we have the ability to answer those what if questions that when somebody comes to you and say, okay, if you take this design and this pathway, this is what your community of the future can really look like. And so I have the wonderful pleasure of working and having oversight for the Energy Systems Integration Facility for the Department of Energy, where we bring in partners and users to really accelerate and have the impact and answer their what if questions at a pace and scale that matters. Right? What does a microgrid in a remote community look like that's disadvantaged? How do we bring in these assets? Maybe there's 20 megawatts of solar. Maybe there's community storage. Maybe they're worried about a natural disaster and they can't get into that community because the road is damaged by the storm. And what if they had a cyber attack? How do we think about all these elements coming together, and how do we address the communication as we need to start thinking about more and more of these assets coming together to have our dream, to have that secure, resilient community of the future?
Well said, and table setting there. I'm going to pivot to Liana, because you talk about, and your company at Nokia, the critical network provider, and people may think of, well, they're the ping power pipe and they do that kind of thing. Well, I love this phrase, humanity connected. I'm a big fan of how tech, humanity, and culture intersect. The smart solutions Nokia is investing in. Liana, you've mentioned flexibility and automation and all of this smart connected stuff and how it works. When you hear Martha talk about all this research and development, How do you view Nokia's role in helping driving that innovation?
I think it's a really good point, Pete, and I get really excited listening to Dr. Martha talk because we've really spent a lot of time thinking about just these things. So when we look at the US and all the problems we've had with grid supply during massive disasters, we see very similar things happening in Australia, and we see the need in Europe, especially because they have such a high penetration of renewables. We do see this need or this conversation happening around not just automation from a macro grid scale and the regulation that goes along with that to the micro grid scale, which she's talking about with community energy. Where we look and where we really sit is looking at it in a myriad of ways. We have a full portfolio of different types of communication products, obviously, that can solve the problem in multiple ways. But for us as a company, and the reason we've really centralized resources around some of the industries, especially the critical national infrastructure industries, is because we feel as a vendor it's very important for us to stand with our utilities, with our communities, to say this is the need, recognize that need, and to build solutions that fit with that need. So at Dr. Martha's lab, they may be looking at innovation, they may be looking at different ways to do things or new types of innovation and technology. It then needs to be standardized, and we need to commit to developing, equipment that can run in new spectrums. We need to look at the requirements to run in special environments that are more critical. We look at standards like IEC 1613 and IEC 615-3, and some of those different types of environments that we need to be able to support. So it's really up to us as a vendor to understand the power utility industry, understand the challenges, and then build solutions and build products that fit into that category. And I think that's really where you see Nokia focusing on the critical national infrastructure.
I appreciate the comments about this constantly dynamic conversation. The world's moving at such a clip. The Internet of Things, the industrial Internet of Things, the natural disasters that we learn from. And I think to everyone who's mentioned it in our pre-call and just now, just early on, that resilience is what we're trying to build up or build, period. So thank you for that conversation that you're carrying all over the world. We'll come back here in a minute and talk a little bit about what it's going to take to keep that conversation going as we embrace standards and regulation that are so part of really spearheading that. So Alia, you mentioned it, private LTE, spectrum, you've actually designed and engineered. You're somebody that I find in my world, in my prior life, I love to talk, but I also love to learn. Dispel a myth or two, or talk to us about how important this evolution of communications, be it 900 megahertz. I know you've built and designed some projects. How do you speak to spectrum, so whether it's the C-level or the folks who are really building it understand its criticality?
Yeah, spectrum has always been a very important and expensive asset, right? But the advantages you get from it are well worth it. They do justify what it comes with. For example, I would go for utilities because it's a new world for them to get into the telecommunications and the wireless connectivity. You want to build a network that is resilient, that is reliable, that is also accessible for you whenever you need it, and with low latency. And that's why I promote for the private LTE, because we know it's going to accommodate all of that for us. Talking about the spectrum here, it's hard to get by right now, but it's very important to know what the utilities needs are, so we can accommodate that. There is the mission critical stuff, there is the non-mission critical stuff that I can carry over different spectrums. The bandwidth that I get is very important, which means the bigger the bandwidth is, that means I can accommodate more devices within the cell coverage area versus a smaller bandwidth. And that's part of the conversation that Liana would actually lead, is the devices and collaborating with utilities to understand what their needs, what kind of use cases they want to address when they deploy their networks. like you said, Pete, going with the low band spectrum, that means I can cover more area with less number of sites. But again, I have to combine it with the bandwidth here. So it's all tying in together with the technology evolution. You said it, the Internet of Things, the smart cities, the smart homes, smart appliances. I want to make sure that I have the reliable platform that would communicate both ways. The customer can understand how their appliances are working. If I have a problem, then I need to attend to. So it's very important to have that two-way communication in order to attend to the current customer needs.
Yeah, and I'm going to just remind the audience there's a number there's a ton of material on energy.gov you can go read about it at the respective sites of these amazing folks here on this phone, and not physically seeing the face, but Martha, Dr. Martha is there. But please check it out. You're not going to learn it in a day. You're not going to go down to Best Buy, as I like to say, buy a smart something, plug it in and go, hey, I'm a smart home. It all works. There's an interoperability component. So we're going to come back to that when we talk a little about innovation, and thank you, Alia. That I appreciate that you probably have a lot of hard conversations when you start getting into the weeds of how to license spectrum, how to use spectrum, how to design it, because people are just like, my Wi-Fi is not working, and you're like, well, there's a problem, and you don't want to understand how complex it is. So thank you. Kathy, let's pivot to you. I mean, Utilities Technology Council, being a chairperson, you clearly have been in the room, the boardroom, with C-level and folks who just want to know, what's on the horizon, what they need to do. What was that experience, and is that experience like for you, and how has it shaped the way you communicate and collaborate around this very complex topic?
So I would say the biggest thing that it provided was a very holistic view of what utilities go through. So Liana addressed the fact that utilities have a lot of the same issues globally, and that is 100% true. So like regardless of whether you're in the United States or you're in Europe, you're in South America, Africa is maybe a little bit unique, but we really have the same issues. We have the same issues with spectrum. Like spectrum is a challenge no matter where you are. And really being able to listen to and understand what utilities' challenges are, and being able to, help them provide the, the framework to address some of those issues and be able to participate in advocacy. One of the things that I have found very frustrating during the time that I was on the board is utilities' access to spectrum. Like utilities have not had spectrum allocated to them. I'm going to disagree with Alia for a second. You said spectrum and communications is new to utilities, but utilities have actually used communications since the 60s. We use it a different way now. Like they haven't had access to broadband spectrum, but they had land mobile radio and SCADA. But it's evolving and changing, and utilities, we're expected to be able to communicate and add all these devices and add all these renewables and have smart communities without being allocated spectrum. And spectrum is in the broadband space is very, very expensive. And so, being able to, so that all goes to ratepayers, which, that's fine. And that's, part of the cost of doing business. But one of the things that I've always said is that utilities need to be better about finding their voice in communications. Like if we all filed comments with the FCC, we have a very big voice as utilities, but utilities are not very good about voicing their viewpoints when it comes to communication. So like, a lot of utilities have government regulatory people, but they're really focused on the energy side, not so much on the communication side, and really having that voice for communications, for advocacy, advocating to make sure that we have the spectrum and technology that we need that underpins our grid and the grid modernization is really, really important.
So I'm going to stop here. Thank you. I'm going to ask the panel, any comments on anything anybody has said? Let's start with Martha. Did anything resonate with you?
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, we are really trying to address security and resilience. And as we do it, we can't do it in a silo. And that's the beauty of this whole ability to communicate, not just communicate with these devices and the assets, but as we're developing these this technology and really trying to address at the heart the future, it's going to take not just a utility, it's going to take a utility, it's going to take somebody like Anterix, it's going to take somebody like Nokia, it's going to take universities, it's going to take the whole industry coming together and working together, and as well as thinking about how all these devices communicate together, right? It's not just, hey, I've got this device, this widget, as Pete said, off the shelf, and I'm just going to plug it in. No, we all have to work together for our common goal. And that's a really important takeaway point. It's like a coffee shop. You could either sit in the coffee shop by yourself, or you can start to mix and mingle with other folks and try to really draw on those things. So I see it as truly a systems integration period to address our nation's goals of not only just we need this communication, but it's you know, a solar provider, it's the electric vehicle infrastructure, it's the controller, it's there's so many different pieces and parts. And so I urge us, as we think about communication, really to think about how we communicate, what the real challenges and the goals are, so that we can make sure that we have the right strategy to have impact at the end of the day.
Well said. Liana.
So a couple of things. Number one, and Kathy mentioned, you know, the idea of having a voice, and that power utilities, especially in the US, have not yet had spectrum allocated to them. One of the things I've loved about coming to Europe now and working in Europe and having all of this US background is seeing what Comrade has done in Ireland, where they've actually auctioned off specifically only power utilities, or only utilities could bid on the spectrum. And we're seeing the same thing happen in Germany and Poland and other places. And now Nokia can draw on, and specifically our global practice team in our segment dedicated to energy has been able to draw on that experience and bring it to our customers in the US. And so the knowledge share that's been happening, you know, I know that we've worked with EPRI as well in different areas, and they've done some work in this space. So we're able, and UTC as well, we're able to draw together again and collaborate, not just as a nation, but globally, to talk about this need for that is going to really help us reach net zero and help with the climate crisis by implementing and integrating all these renewable resources. And so being able to draw again and create this large community of people and needs and communicate that is just so key. And the other piece I would make, when we talked a little bit about what Dr. Martha is doing with the renewable energy and the microgrids, communication is that base layer. And then on top of that is the data. And so that opens a new layer of complexity when you talk about federating that data and deciding where that data needs to go, for how long, et cetera. And so the key component to the business models and to really reaching net zero and being able to trade energy at a micro level, a community level, is really about the communication, moving that data where it needs to go to make decisions.
Alia, I'm going to come to you right now, just to riff off of Liana brought up this perspective that while the energy is something, or energy sector in any country, energy powers everything. And in our country, the 16 critical infrastructure sectors, I'm partial because I think without power, stuff doesn't work. And I think it's just so important that we continue this global discussion, that while there might be unique situations in certain countries, generating, transmitting, and distributing power is part of what we need in humanity's realm. So I love, and I feel it, and I hear it in the voices that we have to keep this conversation going. And Ali, if you can speak to being at a utility, we all know they're a very key part of it. I think of the energy sector as the owners and operators of are really where it happens. Can you talk about how do you feel, whether it's utility industry as a whole or at Xcel, that there's this, you want to innovate, but you also don't want to bring in any opportunity for compromise in your backyard, if you will, at the utility. So what are your thoughts on this whole innovation? But if it's not broken, why are we trying to fix it?
This is a great question, Pete. Thank you for asking it. So to the utility defense, because of their not playing a big part with FCC to get more spectrum and all of that, this is a new thing to them, right? The grid has been there for many, many years, and it takes a lot for you to pivot and, you know, catch up to the technology and the evolution and everything else that's happening there. At the end of the day, what would be holding back is the customers, because they are your biggest asset. You want to make sure that you pivot while you maintain your services, because we're all customers at the end of the day, right? I come in home, I want to flip the switch, I want to have energy, I want to have gas. Whenever I need my cell phone, I want it to work, right? This is what we pay for as customers. So this is one of the challenges, that you want to evolve your grid. You want to become, attend to the smart city and the smart appliances and everything else. But at the same time, this is new to the utility industry. So this is one of the things that I've been working on, is building the business case. Why we need to go there, why we need to have a private LTE network that is secure, that is resilient. And it's going to also, the nice thing about it is it's going to tie in all the different disparate systems that we have, like we have LMR, we have any other ways of communication out there. It's not one system, it's not one platform. I have to upgrade them separate, and that comes with efficiency and cost and all that stuff. So having one platform that would bring everything else together, and then deploying that network will also get me the data that I need to make better decisions to attend the current customer's need. I know where I need to kind of make changes to my grid. I need to know where I need to deploy more devices, and then I will make better decisions also for the future. Where do I see myself? Where am I going? So I know, like, the FCC is kind of now more open to coming up with spectrum and to the utilities, but at the end of the day, they're a small fish in a shark tank, right? Because we know that commercial carriers hog all of the spectrum. And we understand why. So that's one of the, there are a lot of challenges, but again, to me, it's very exciting that I see the utility companies are actually pivoting that way and catching up to it and understanding and actually investigating. And this will take collaboration from a lot of parties here. Making, one thing that I would like to see is coming up with like incentives or reward program that is unique to each utility company. They will look at the last couple years maybe of how many outages did you have, how long they lasted, how frequent they were, the SAIFI and SAIDI and all that stuff, and come up with certain metrics that are unique for each utility company, because they're not all the same, and say, hey, if you improve your resiliency, your mean time to repair, and any other metrics that we would look at, or KPIs, if you improve those by a certain percentage, either the government or maybe a big investor will come and set up a reward system for them. So I think that would be also motivating somehow. That's something I really would like to see.
So thank you, Kathy. I'm going to come to you because, again, you're the forum that you've been in and you are in, and you know, Alia, you just kind of blew my mind in a great way, which is, I have found that the C-level is out there always, of course, wanting to talk about, hey, we're not just an old school utility. We believe that we've got to take care of our networks and protect our assets, which includes data, and we'll come right back to federated data. And Martha, just to preview after Kathy, I want you to talk a little bit about the ARES effort and the framework there. Kathy, when you hear this, can you help either dispel a myth or speak to that this conversation, which includes NIST and in our country, the Department of Homeland Security and the utilities and the EPRIs of the world, and of course the carriers, how do you get, when you're having people in a room, folks saying, you know, this is complicated and this isn't about the bottom line per se, it's we've got to build a network that's resilient and secure and safe and flexible to save lives. We've seen too many natural disasters, physical disasters recently, where people are dying. How do we get this conversation and move the needle going?
Well, I will say, you know, utilities have done an amazing job with what they have had to work with, right? So I talk about the fact that utilities have done communications since the 1960s, using very low bandwidth spectrum for land mobile radio and SCADA. That's been around for a very long time. And then as new requirements have come up, new networks have been put into place. I like to say that utilities have kind of the table scraps of spectrum from the FCC that we duct tape and bubble gum together to make our networks work. And we do a really good job with that as utilities. I think it's pretty phenomenal. Like, if you, as an example, Tropical Storm Harvey, which was in Texas in like 2017, the commercial carriers, their networks went down for a number of days, into like, in some cases, into like a week or over a week. And the utility, the local utility in the area, their communications network stayed up 100%. With the exception of one substation that was underwater, it was flooded, and so but it was an endpoint, right? It wasn't a tower site or anything, and we do a really good job with that. And I think it's really expanding upon those experiences and those abilities that utilities have, and sharing that story with the different agencies that you talk about, so that we're not, one of the things that I found like pretty frustrating when I was, on the board of UTC is how siloed the government is, and getting people to talk to each other and getting people to be able to have those conversations and understand, where those things are coming from is really, really important. And having the utilities a part of those conversations is really, really important. And having those people, those engineers that are, designing those networks a part of those conversations is really, really important. And having forums and mechanisms for doing that is really where I see the benefit. And everyone has really talked about how important it is for us to work together. It's working with manufacturers, it's working with spectrum owners, it's working with the governmental agencies, and it's working with utilities, and it's all of us coming together. And even we talk about utilities, but it's not even just utilities. It's there's additional mission critical mission critical sectors that you alluded to with the the 16 critical infrastructure, and it's working with them too, because there are pieces of their networks that are also critically important. And if we can, the more people we have talking about it and the more people we have supporting it, the better our solutions are going to be.
So let me summarize for folks who are getting a sense, I hope, that this isn't something you fix overnight. Our guests have obviously expressed the importance of collaboration, but if you want to read about this very topic, if there's something that's fresh that you're interested in March this month, 2021, the United States Government Accountability Office came out with the Electricity Grid Cybersecurity Report. Great charts. I like charts. I'm a graphical guy, literally, but it addresses risks to distribution systems, and it really is a good read. So please, I encourage everybody to take a look at it. Again, it's the GAO report dated March 2021. I think that'll help connect a few dots here for us. And again, it's just coming to me as I'm listening to you folks, because you're amazing. So Martha, talk to us a little bit about ARES, because I see the National Laboratory as a resource for all of these stakeholders: industry, government, regulators, the entrepreneurs, the science behind building a secure grid, a resilient grid. Can you speak to sort of what ARES was developed for and how successful it's been?
So yes, absolutely. ARES, just so folks know what Pete is alluding to when he says ARES, Advanced Research Integration Energy Systems at Scale. So when you think ARES, Advanced Research, really looking at and driving from the grid edge all the way up to the backbone of the utility. The ability to not only think about multiple devices, as we talked about earlier on in this discussion, but also larger devices. All of a sudden you have the idea that maybe your microgrid could use seasonal storage, but if you're a utility and you want to do some kind of large scale storage, how are you going to validate it and make sure that the design and your black box and how everything comes together is actually going to work? You can come to the laboratory, you can work with state-of-the-art researchers, but also academia and the industry and the utilities, and you can start to really better understand at scale these new hybrid approaches as you move from that grid edge. So really an exciting time for NREL as we think about scaling. And we always say at a pace and scale that matters. Why? Because you can't just jump into 100 megawatt solar installation with community storage and go, oh, this is all going to work, together. It is a very much a methodical grid modernization approach where you start to really understand your devices, maybe at small scale, how they then come together, how they communicate, and then how the system performs, and data that comes out of it. And then the data that you can share with folks, the good, the bad data, the ability to provide folks like the PUC this knowledge that you just learned from doing a very methodical approach at scale. So that's what's really exciting to me, Pete, about Aries today, is that we have the ability now to really look at our 300-acre site up site. It's off of the Flatirons campus up by Boulder. And as we're bringing these technologies together, it is mind-boggling of what great work we can do, because now we're not limited to a 180,000 square foot building. We can really start to build up some of these assets, these key assets that will make every single one of us and others that much more successful and have impact at the end of the day. That is the key for all this great research we're doing at the laboratory. How do we help you have that impact? You come bring us your what if questions, and we hope we can answer those, whether it is the electrical, the thermal, the fuels. All these pieces are coming together with Aries. What an exciting time for a national lab.
Awesome. Any comment on that before I'm going to totally pivot to a humanizing question? Good? Okay, we're getting a few coming in.
I want to go work there, honestly. Like, it sounds fun.
I just want to go play there. Let's just go have fun there.
Exactly, yeah.
Hey, listen, ladies, for you, if you haven't been to a national laboratory, NREL's way cool. It's beautiful, and Martha's an incredible host. But yes, anybody listening, watching today, take an opportunity to visit these labs. This is where I had 8 years of an opportunity to see where folks who go to work every day to invent and innovate do it because it's for the greater good and it's passion. So yes, thank you, Martha, and to everybody. Please check out those labs, learn about them and their history, not just in this country, but how they're an international partner. Okay, this is for everybody. So a question that has come in is who, celebrating the month that we should be celebrating or are celebrating, who or what was the biggest influence in your lives that really set you on your path, knowing that we're probably a lot of doors open and closed? But Liana, can you talk about that, the influence and how the passion just sort of grew from it?
Oh, wow. So I think that's a really tough one, Pete. There's so many people that, and like so many of us women, I think that my path has been zigzagged all over. You know, I don't think I ever, well, so when I was little, I wanted either to be a ballerina or I wanted to be a lineman and climb poles because I love to climb. So I think early on, I was very fascinated with electricity and with the delivery of electricity, and have so much respect for the linemen that are out there and what they do. I think, though, from a female perspective, bringing the female element into this, I'm going to have to say it was my stepdad. I grew up with no brothers, and I grew up on a farm, and so we all had some heavy chores to do. But my stepdad always told us, get an education, get a good job, you can do anything you want to do. You know, you have, the sky's the limit for you. And you compare my generation to my mom, where she didn't have the opportunity that I had. And so I've just never been told, no, you can't do that. So at least not by my dad. And so I think that I've taken that and just said, you know what, I want to go do something. The other piece of that, I think my family, my sisters and my mom were all in medical fields, and that was not for me. So I'm like, how can I impact people's lives? I want to do something that's valuable, something that's important and help society. And that's when I think I found my passion working, when I started working for Amireh. You know, that was really, their motto at the time was that powering the quality of life. And I really still feel that way. I still feel that I want to do something and give back and in some way support society. And that's what I can do. But I would definitely say that I think my stepdad just encouraged me to spread my wings and go do whatever. And so, yeah, here I am.
That's a great story, and we talked about this. My mom's a retired surgeon, and I the whole blood thing was like, I still to this day can't get a finger prick without freaking out. But hey, I ended up doing what I love. Alia, same question to you.
I would owe it to my parents, my mom and dad. Like since middle school, they've always enforced the education on us and the importance of it. And the most important thing is for you to do what you love, because when you love what you do, you're gonna excel at it and do your best. So starting middle school, I started getting more interested in electricity and telecommunications. That my dad, poor dad, I took apart one of those very old radios that he had, and he was so in love with it, and I could not put it back together. It was, but his reaction was just amazing. I mean, he's like, well, you have a passion and continue doing what you're doing and follow it. And when I decided to get into college, electrical engineering was a new field in Palestine. So it was like under 30% of females were in my class. But you just keep pushing through it and you love it. And I have no regrets going into that field. I owe it to my parents.
I have to say, Alia, I did the same thing. I took apart my mother's cassette recorder she used in her college classes, and I couldn't get it back together. My stepdad had to help me. So maybe it's just something with women taking things apart. Kathy, did you ever take anything apart?
No, but I wasn't ever planning to be an engineer when I was younger. I was going to be an architect.
Oh, wow.
So,
My dad, God bless him, was an architect. So blood and drawing couldn't do it, but I know we talked about that. Kathy, go, come on, you're up. Give us that
okay.
influence. And
So I have four things. So one is teachers. Like I had the best math teachers that made me absolutely love math. I also had a great power systems professor once I got into college, and once I got into the engineering track, which is why me and the folks, many of the folks that I worked with at my former utility went into power. But my dad was a professor of engineering technology, which is kind of like engineering without calculus. And so I grew up with him writing textbooks and teaching, and never even thought that, once I changed from being an architecture major, because I did actually start in architecture, changed majors in my freshman year, which I realized architecture was a lot of art and I suck at art. And but I never realized, honestly, like I had classes where I was like one of few women. Alia, you talk about 30%. I was one of 4 women in a graduating class of 75. So that's like, I'm pretty sure like 5%. And it wasn't until I was at the utility that I realized, like, oh my God, there's no women in what I do. Like it was not something I even thought about, not something, my dad I could do anything that I wanted to, right? He wanted one of his daughters, he only had daughters, to be an engineer. And so it never even occurred to me that that was something unique until I became like, where's the other women here? Why am I the only one? And then I would say I also wanted to like give a shout out to my mom, because my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she built our garage and she did woodworking. She was the one that was buying the power tools. And growing up in an environment like that, like you don't think that there's anything that you can't do, or you don't think that there's anything like unique about being a woman in these fields. And then I'd also say my hiring manager, I talked about him a little bit, but he gave me, he put me in charge of a $20 million project when I was a couple years into my job. And I implemented my first land mobile radio system and led it. And giving a young person that much responsibility and having their back to, just to be a mentor and to, but letting them run with it was the most invaluable experience that I had. And also, I would say, set me up for how I worked with other people that I worked with that were younger than me. Like they need that responsibility, and it's really an important way to grow.
yeah, I appreciate that. Martha, you're on the clock here in like 10 seconds. Again, the theme, women in STEM, we talked about women in this industry. Look, it's to me just amazing listening to each of you in that formation. I didn't set out to do what I'm doing for a living. I wanted to be a sports broadcaster, but I did have influence in some way, shape, or form when I entered the government at 21. So the culture and the environment that we're in, and continuing to shape that, each of you, we need more of each of you in this world. So I appreciate those stories. Facts tell, stories sell, folks, and this is the humanizing component as we get close to the end here. Martha, influence, passion, who are those people in your life?
Yeah, so my father is a physics professor at the University of Utah, and he would take us every weekend. He'd be working and grading papers, and my sister and I'd go play downstairs in the hallways and of the physics building and set up all sorts of great experiments with dominoes and things like that. But it wasn't until really, I pursued my passion, and I have an undergrad in physics and a PhD in material science. It wasn't really till after my undergrad when I went to the University of Denver and I had the ability to work here at the National Renewable Energy Lab for my doctorate and meeting some of the wonderful women scientists around here. And I will just put a big shout out to Bobby Garrett, who she was our chief operating officer and retired about a year ago. She was really a huge influence in my life on just keep going. Don't let that get to you. Move forward. You're doing great things. And so she was such a wonderful mentor and still continues to be so in my life. But I also say at the end of the day, having a husband and supportive family enables my career and the ability for me to, go to DC or go to on a trip, and knowing that everything is balanced and right. I think a lot of times the challenge is making sure that dynamic is right for you if that's the pathway you pursue. So I would say that it's not just who you're around in your work, but also who's in your private life and who are some of those women that might not be a part of your career but a part of your life, and the kind of the stronger women that influence you, or you'll say, wow, that friend of mine, she's really smart, I want to hang out with her. And so then you kind of feed off of each other to do just amazing things. So having inspirational women in my life, having just a great spouse at the end of the day, I think a lot of folks resonate with that as well. So thanks for that 10-second spiel.
Oh no, I'm just taking down notes, learning as I might be a dude and a husband, but I always say I was there for the birth of all 4 of my children, and I remember saying I am not ever going to be worthy in life for what the female goes through, and I just want to bring it home because I think my wife is my rock, and if she saw this, she'd be rolling her eyes. But I appreciate that, and I'm just psyched that I have this opportunity to talk with each of you. So we've got about 7 minutes, maybe 6.5. I like to move into the parting shot, which is where we can assimilate. What did we learn, glean from today? We don't have enough time. I mean, I'm looking at topics that we wanted to get to, and I hope in some way, shape, or form, women in STEM, 21st century workforce, influence of policy, partnerships, federating data, technology's not the problem, and the constant need for collaborative communications. We tapped in this spectrum space and rural broadband and the importance of it. But I think we covered a pretty nice swath, but most importantly got to know 4 amazing thought leaders and visionaries and pioneers. So use this parting shot time, each of you. We'll start with Liana, go to Alia, Kathy, and then finish it out with Martha. What struck you today as something you want to leave with the audience, but also inspired you to kind of keep this conversation going? Liana.
So it's interesting. So I'm going to take this from the human side again and from the female side, and listening to all 4 of us about the importance of male champions in our life. I think we've all mentioned at least one man who has influenced us in some way and supported us in some way. And I think it's so very important for women in this field, especially when we're the only woman in the room, which happens frequently when you're in communications and in power utility space, that we have that support for men to fly, to go, and to help us with any self-doubts that we have, or to encourage and inspire us to do amazing things. So I think that being Women's History Month is amazing. I work with some amazing women. Kathy and I have known each other for 10 years. Alia, I can't wait to get to know you more. And Dr. Martha, I hope I meet you one day. But I think even at that, it does take more than just the women. And I'm a firm believer in thought diversity, and the way we're going to solve things like climate crisis, net zero, and gender diversity is through thought diversity and bringing everyone together, men, women, all different cultures, all different belief systems, to create a better solution. And that's the only way we're going to do it.
Amen to that. High five, raise the roof. Loved it. Alia, you're up.
So my biggest takeaway is learning about all these amazing women that I'm really proud of to know, and learning that all the great work that's happening in the background, right? Working it through the UTC and NREL labs and Nokia, everybody else is working on something, and everybody's trying to make a a difference, make an impact. And at the end of the day, we have to define our goal. Our goal is better life for the future, for our children and humanity to come, because there's a lot of craziness going on in this world, and we just want to make things to get better and better for the future. Another thing I would bring up is the STEM. And seeing women excel in those fields and knocking doors that have never been opened for women before. Like Liana said, we owe it to the males that are supportive of this, and the businesses that actually are encouraging diversity and allowing women to get into fields that they were never been before. A great event that I participated in 2018 was a SWE conference, Society of Women Engineers. It was in Minneapolis, and it moved me a lot to see all those young ladies coming into the booth, and they're asking about what we do in engineering, and they sign up. Some of them actually got interviews on the spot and all that stuff. So it's really awesome to see women making that difference. And again, we owe it to the support system that's out there, and we try to do it all while keeping customers in mind, because customers are the biggest assets. And I'm just very excited about everything that's happening, and I'm hoping that excitement is as contagious as the smile to the audience and get everybody excited as they are. And thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, of course. And what spoke to me just there was something my mother always impressed upon me as a physician is compassion for the patient. And you just talked about voice of customer. So wonderfully stated, very eloquent. Thank you very much. Kathy Nelson.
So I'm going to also talk about the human side and the female side, because you mentioned that I have a podcast, and this is like one of the things that for me was like, it came out of the pandemic. It happened because of COVID. I don't know that I would have done it otherwise, but I have been able to meet and share stories of the most amazing women. I have, you know, everyone from, I talked to a 14-year-old, I haven't edited that one, got that one out yet, all the way to retired engineers, entrepreneurs, women with PhDs, all different STEM fields. And the thing that I have found, there's a couple things that I have found that have been like really, really touched my heart so greatly is, one is the need for community, because some women feel so alone. Like they might be the only person, you know, as an example, on a manufacturing floor, they might be the only person, or not the only one person, the only woman. And it's a huge challenge. And so for them to not feel alone, for them to feel like, you know, we've all gone through these challenges is really, really important to me. And the passion that I have found that women hold for their jobs and their careers, and it's so inspiring. And I will say, like I said, I've been an engineer for almost 30 years, and to hear what these women are doing has honestly inspired me in what I want to do in the remainder of my career. And it's just been like really just eye-opening. And I love, you know, the creating community, I think, is really the biggest thing that I have found to be important, is having that community of strong women to have conversations with, regardless of what, you know, STEM field or even field that we're in, is just really, really important and just inspiring to me.
I love it, and I can't wait to listen to one of your podcasts. I'd love to feature each of you as well in a forum, and I plan to reach out inside the Beltway. We need more of this inspiring passion that you each and all bring individually and collectively. So thank you, Kathy. Hey, Miss Martha, other than everybody wanting to come out and meet you and see you in the wonderful state of Colorado and NREL, why don't you close us out with your parting shot?
Yes, so as I've detailed a lot of energy systems integration and grid modernization in a system of systems, we're part of that system. We may not be the device or the asset or that specific technology, but we're part of the system to enable it and make it a brighter future, right? And as we do that, you know, we've had folks that have really helped mentor and shape our lives. I think I leave this with you folks. It is our goal to make sure that for every single one of us that has had a mentor, we should at least turn the other direction and say, who can I mentor and help support? Females and males, whoever it is. For every one, you should have a list of 5. And so I think that just grows this great ecosystem of systems. So I'm going to leave you with that and make sure that you don't forget about those who truly need to be mentored and helped along as you go forward.
Yeah, I have to try to do my parting shot by summarizing just a couple of things, but thank you, Martha, and each of you, again, individually and collectively for being a part of this. This is the last time I'm sure we will all talk. I want to, of course, give a shout out again to some of the folks that pulled this together, specifically the two Danielles. Big hugs being sent your way. Anthony, Hare, we call him. If you ever saw Anthony, you know what I'm talking about. Rafa, who you didn't see, but Rafa's been the backbone for building this program on behalf of Anterix. I want to shout out again and just remind everybody, check out the blog at the Women in Wireless Infrastructure Industry Ecosystem World. They're writing great stuff about amazing individuals, women, and in spirit of this month, please check it out. My takeaway from this, because I always am inspired as well, is that I look at these three physically, but know Martha, know that I can see her because I know what she looks like. Your seekers and your solvers. Your curiosity spoke to me today. You're clearly articulate, storytelling, brilliant individuals, females in an industry that we need more in. But that spoke to me. This isn't about a transaction. It's truly about embracing the curiosity, and you're all laced with integrity. So thank you for inspiring me. And until the next time, I just want to, again, say we need to have more of this conversation. Please keep bringing your passion and purpose each and every day to the world, and we'll talk again soon.